Hello, my name is Zhao, and I'm the inventor of the ExoHand, a wearable, 3D printable, and low-cost exoskeleton that suppresses hand tremors in people with movement disorders. So here's how it works. The ExoHand locks 2 degrees of freedom of the user's wrist. First, flexion, and then rotation, thereby allowing them to hold anything in a stable position. Because the reality is that people with movement disorders, for instance, Parkinson's and essential tremors, will often find that completing very simple tasks such as lifting a cup of water or brushing their teeth can often be rendered very difficult due to the extensive tremors that their wrists have to go through. Notice how the position of the wrist is locked whenever the user holds something. There is a sensor on the thumb that detects when the user is picking up something and when they're letting go. And so this tells the computer to let go of the object by releasing the servos. The reason why I developed the ExoHand is because I wanted to find a low-cost solution to a very expensive problem. The reality is that on the current market, treatment plans for essential tremors, for Parkinson's, are often either medication with side effects or they're very expensive, not very affordable technology, not very accessible to families who don't have the funds for these medical technologies. And so the ExoHand is actually produced with PLA plastic, so it's very, very cheap. And it uses an Arduino, wires, magnets, and servos. And so collectively, the hand shouldn't be worth more than $100 in pure production cost. And so by lowering the price of the ExoHand, we allow more people to have access to technologies like this, allowing them to go through their day more easily and, most importantly, more comfortably. As a child, I've always noticed that I have shaky hands, and I found out because most of my hobbies have to do with precision work. So for instance, one of my hobbies is taking photos under my microscope, and part of that is obviously placing specimens onto the slide and with the help of a tweezer. And so my hand would always be shaking a lot and it'd be very annoying. And so one day I decided to Google, how do you suppress hand tremors? How do you get rid of hand tremors? Or how to stop your hand from shaking that much? And although I didn't find answers to my personal benefit, I did find a lot of problems. And these problems were that the technologies that were being provided, for instance, some wearable glove from the UK, costed $700. And there was this other watch kind of device that stimulates nerves within the wrist that also costed like thousands of dollars. And so I quickly realized that these prices are not affordable by every single family around the world, especially not by those in developing countries who may not have the funds or even the resources to gather to produce such device. And that kind of marked the beginning of the ExoHand. Now that you've heard about the origins of the ExoHand, it's important to address that the ExoHand is part of my mission of boosting accessibility in science. So I've always been a very, very major proponent for ensuring that as many people as possible have access to the fruits of science. And so for instance, I founded a science website called teamlytical.com. I've founded the Rocket Science at Club. But my point is that I'm very passionate about ensuring that people have access to tools that can benefit their lives. And the ExoHand is among my latest invention. So in terms of how the ExoHand came to be, I would say that it started off with just market research. And so as we talked about earlier, that's the Googling part, that's the realizing that things are way too expensive part. And on top of that, I actually also emailed local movement disorder clinics, so actual clinics, also clinics from universities like McGill University and the University of British Columbia, where these professionals from the industry told me about the very physiology, the very biomechanics of hand tremors, and they also gave me tips on how to suppress these different movements in the wrist. With research out of the way, I moved on to the actual development part. And so I actually have my journal right here. Here are some of the designs that I made. And so, I'd be on the bus or I might be in the car and I would pull out this journal and I would start, drawing out ideas for the ExoHand. And so when I got home, I would then transfer these ideas onto my computer, which I would then 3D design on my CAD software, and then finally upload the file onto a USB, plug it into my 3D printer, which is right there, and then print out the pieces, assemble them, and test them. And the last part, which is actually coming in March 2023 this year, is experimental trials. So I've actually been in contact with some retirement homes, with some movement disorder clinics, and I'm planning on conducting some research on actual human participants who have movement disorders. And so this is meant to gather data to confirm that the ExoHand is in fact effective at suppressing hand tremors. Because if it isn't, then, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the ExoHand. The current market offers treatments based on biological means. And so what I mean by that is we're talking anti-seizure medication, we're talking beta blockers, we're talking propranolol, I still can't say it, it's this word. But basically, we're using biology to treat hand tremors, which means that people are ingesting things or being stimulated through electrical means on the outside. On the other hand, the ExoHand actually suppresses hand tremors purely through mechanical means. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that we're using external forces to lock the hand in place. And so this removes all risk of biological symptoms that could arouse from the other medication that I talked about earlier. With the pros out of the way, we have to address the cons of the ExoHand. Even before experimental trials, I can already identify many problems with this concept. The major one being that the ExoHand only suppresses wrist tremors. And so in terms of tremors along the entire upper limb, we see that patients will often have not just wrist tremors, but also finger tremors and elbow and shoulder tremors. Now, tremors usually worsen the further you go away from the arm, which means that many people who want to use the ExoHand also want to suppress their finger tremors. But unfortunately, the ExoHand doesn't offer that right now. Now, the good thing is that movement disorders like essential tremors are predominantly wrist. Now, then again, how about the fingers? That's a problem. And of course, the last question, also the question that I didn't really have an answer to, what would I do with the cash award? I can tell you what I did before, like in history. And finally, the last question, what would I do with the cash award? Frankly, I don't know. I wrote this in my written response too. I don't know. What I've done before when I won cash, so for instance, when I won cash from the Greater Vancouver Regional Science Fair, I actually invested it into my 3D printer, which is by far one of the best investments I've ever made in my entire life, because that has helped me make this possible. And so, following a similar trend, if I win, the money from the Ingenious award, I would likely invest it back into my scientific endeavors. In what way, I don't know. Now that I have a 3D printer, I feel like that's enough for now. But if there's ever any new technology that can help me realize my vision of making science more accessible for people, I will make sure to put that on my Amazon wish list. And so there it is. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to express my passion on biomedical engineering, on building this ExoHand, and I'm very excited to see what is to come next. Thank you, and have a good day.